Hello, and welcome to this KU Writing Center workshop. My name is Emma Kostopoulos, and I am one of the graduate coordinators at the Writing Center. Today, I'm going to talk to you about how you can identify and avoid a common problem in composing: plagiarism. Today, we're going to cover several topics, all of which will help you better understand plagiarism and avoid it in your writing. First, we'll briefly discuss writing as a process, since it is helpful to understand why you were doing something as you were doing it. Then, we'll talk about the different forms of plagiarism and how you can identify it, and why it's important to not plagiarize. Finally, we'll cover strategies for preventing plagiarism in your writing. I'm sure that all of you are very familiar with graphics like the one currently up on the slide, that construct the writing process as movement, from pre-writing and invention, to research, to drafting, to revision, and beyond. What I'd like to talk about today is that this chart, while giving us a helpful understanding of the progression of ideas, displays an oversimplified version of what happens when we write. The writing process is, first of all, highly individual. Everyone writes differently. There's no one right way to brainstorm or to draft. The key is to find what practices are most effective for you. Next, the writing process is inherently nonlinear. This means that this neat little circle doesn't accurately capture the realities of writing. You could get all the way to revision and then realize that you need to go back and expand upon a point and go back to drafting, or that there's something you didn't explore and go back to research. There should rightly be arrows all over this picture, because you can jump from any point in the writing process to any other point. The writing process is also flexible. You can spend as little or as much time on each step as is necessary for your specific project. Finally, the writing process is a social one. You don't write in a vacuum. Every time you write, you're writing for an audience of other people who you want to see the value in your writing. By including other people in your writing process through things like peer feedback, you're ensuring that your message comes out specifically tailored to the people you're writing for. So, what is plagiarism? Simply put, plagiarism happens when a writer uses another writer's information without indicating that the ideas belong to someone else. This can mean a lot of things. This can mean simply not citing the information correctly and unintentionally plagiarizing, or it can mean consciously attempting to pass someone else's work off as your own. It also doesn't just apply to the literal words. Copying a paragraph of someone's writing directly is plagiarism, but so is rewording their argument and claiming it is something you came up with. Plagiarism is not about the words, but about the ideas. There is a scale of acts of plagiarism that mostly rely on intent to determine how serious an offense they are. On one end of the scale is an accidental improper citation, such as forgetting quotation marks. This can be easily caught and corrected during proofreading. Next would be something like using a source's wording during a paraphrase or summary. You often unconsciously repeat the exact ways in which you originally learned something. Fix this by checking your work against the source and changing the wording or turning it into a quote if it's more than 3 words in the same order. The third unintentional misdemeanor occurs when you neglect to cite a source entirely. This happens most of the time when you are unsure of how to cite a source or when citation is necessary. This workshop will help you with these questions. More serious offenses include things like turning a paper that you wrote for a previous class. While it feels weird to say that you can plagiarize yourself, this is a cut-and-dry instance of academic dishonesty because you are expected to produce new content for each academic class you take. If you copy and paste an entire paragraph of writing or more from another source, that's a case of blatant plagiarism that will likely be punished. Finally, the worst plagiarism offense is passing off a piece of writing you had no part in creating as your own, such as a paper found online or purchased from a company. Despite there being a scale of plagiarism, some of which is unintentional, not everyone differentiates between them. Some instructors consider all acts of plagiarism as equal, and online plagiarism checkers like SafeAssign will note all instances, whether intentional or not. It's ultimately up to your instructor how to address plagiarism, but there are several potential consequences. You may be asked to rewrite the assignment. You may fail the assignment and not be able to rewrite. Or the instructor may decide to pursue more dire consequences and notify the university of your plagiarism so that it goes on your record. You may then fail the entire class, and multiple instances of plagiarism on your record may mean you are forced to leave school. So, aside from the potential punitive consequences, why does plagiarism matter? Well, for starters, the words and ideas of most published authors are protected by law, and using their words in any sort of other professional capacity without citation and permission could lead to a legal battle. This is because these words and their publication are how a lot of people make their living. By not giving the originators of the idea credit, you're stealing from them in a very literal way. By citing the ideas of others, you also stand to benefit. Proper citation is a great way to build your ethos or your credibility as an author. Citations prove that you've done your research, you know what you're talking about, and thus makes your own ideas look stronger. There are many reasons why plagiarism can occur. Let's go through some of the most common reasons now. One of the most common reasons for plagiarism is that the student is confused or frustrated with the assignment and does not know how to complete the assignment under their own power. This can be solved by talking to your peers and your instructors early on and not waiting until the last minute to work on your writing. The next issue is not thinking your ideas are good enough. Self-confidence is an understandable issue, but passing off someone else's ideas as your own will mean that you'll never get the chance to work on them and improve your writing. The third issue, not understanding why it's important, has hopefully been addressed by this presentation by this point. And the fourth point, that you have trouble distinguishing between the types of attribution, will be covered later on in this talk. Another reason you might feel tempted to plagiarize is that you felt pressed for time. Similarly to being confused about the assignment, this can be solved by starting the assignment as soon as you get it, and by putting together a solid time management plan by breaking the assignment into chunks. The next problem, not knowing it counts as plagiarism, should be solved by listening to this presentation. The final two concerns, getting your ideas confused with the ideas of others, can be solved by taking good, well-marked notes, and by using a color coding tip we'll go over later in this presentation. The first step in beating plagiarism is to make sure you are prepared to tackle the assignment. You need to make sure that you completely understand what it is you need to do and give yourself more than enough time to do it. Read your assignment sheet carefully, and if you have any questions, ask your instructor for clarification. Then, you should break the parts of the assignment down and determine how long it will take you to complete each task. How many days do you need for brainstorming, for research, for drafting? Then make these timelines align so that you have time for healthy revision of the project before the due date. If you're unsure of how much time you need for each step in the writing process, you can follow the rule of thirds, which divides the task up into 3 discrete steps. In the first third, you do your research and engage in all the pre-writing and invention work needed to form your argument. The middle third is about actually drafting your paper. Then the last third is about revising, editing, and proofreading. On this slide is an example of how such work might break down if you got an assignment on February 1st and it was due 24 days later. You have just over 3 weeks to complete the assignment, so each third lasts for 8 days. Another big part of beating plagiarism is understanding the tools you have at your disposal to properly integrate someone else's work. There are 3 major ways to incorporate: summary, paraphrase, and quotation. Summary is when you condense the ideas of an entire article or chapter into a paragraph or 2, only hitting the main argument. Paraphrase is similar to summary in that it's in your own words, but instead of condensing the whole argument, you only restate one claim. Thus, while a summary is much shorter than the material it's covering, a paraphrase should be about the same length. Finally, a quotation is when you insert the exact words of the original writing into yours, offset with quotation marks. If you're unsure of what technique to use to incorporate someone else's writing, here's a short guide. Summarizing is good when you need to present only the key ideas of something in order to advance your argument, but you can get away without giving any details. Paraphrasing is for when there's a specific point that's very important, but the language of the original writing might be hard for readers to understand. Quotations are for when the original language is so clear and effective that you can't see a way to improve upon the message. An effective piece of writing that incorporates these citations makes use of all three and does not overuse quotation to drown out the new text. Additionally, you should remember that you still need to provide a citation, even if you're not directly quoting. Ideas, not words. Speaking of citation, you always need to provide an in-text citation after someone else's work, as well as an appropriate full citation, most likely in a works cited at the end of the document. There are several different citation formats, so you need to check with your instructor about which one is expected for the class. Style guides for styles such as MLA, APA, and Chicago can be found online. Online grammar websites like Grammarly might also be able to help you figure out what an in-text citation for a source looks like. The final key in proper source attribution is that you always need to be sure to introduce the sources before you use them. When you introduce, you need to indicate clearly, commonly through the use of a signal phrase, that you're going to talk about someone else's work. You generally do this by saying the author's name, as in the example where the writer signals with cultural theorist Dale Schroeder. These transitions are very important to offset your work from the work of others. A really good trick when writing to make sure that all of your citations are properly attributed is to color code sentences in your writing where you're summarizing, paraphrasing, or quoting. This lets you keep track of where things are coming from as you're writing, so you can go back and be sure all your citations are in order. Another important thing is to make sure that you are not looking directly at the source when you're summarizing or paraphrasing. If you're pulling right from the source, you're likely to accidentally pull too much direct verbiage and not cite correctly. Instead, take notes as you read, then use your notes when writing, so that you're pulling from your own thoughts instead of the source material. So, some key takeaways from this video. It's your duty as a writer, once you know what plagiarism is, to strive to avoid it in your writing. Make sure that you know what style you're working in and follow it closely for citations. Also, make sure that you're introducing your sources with signal phrases. Finally, one of the key ways to prevent plagiarism is to give yourself enough time to comfortably complete the assignment. This concludes our presentation. Thank you for watching.